The massive Glorpian command ship hovered silently above the Earth's stratosphere, its adaptive cloaking technology rendering it invisible to primitive human detection systems. Within its cavernous tactical command center, a tense silence had settled over the assembled officers. The holographic display at the center of the room projected real-time footage of the battlefield below, or rather, what remained of it. Commander Kalen stared at the carnage with growing disbelief. The Glorpian Empire had conquered 17 star systems and subjugated 32 sentient species across 3 galactic quadrants. Their military doctrine was flawless, their technological superiority absolute. And yet, the scene before him defied all logic. "Impossible," Fleet Admiral Forlag muttered, her 4 upper appendages twitching in agitation. Her exoskeleton, adorned with the ceremonial markings of her prestigious rank, seemed to darken with her mood. "These readings must be erroneous." "I verified them 3 times, Admiral," Kalen replied, his voice carefully neutral. As a practical, data-driven officer, he had built his reputation on objective analysis. "The casualty reports are accurate." Strategic Officer Zweit H., the most experienced among them, moved closer to examine the data. His weathered carapace and deliberately slow movements betrayed his caution, a trait that had kept him alive through 17 planetary conquests. 72% of our Vanguard division eliminated. Zweit H's sensory stalks contracted in what the humans might recognize as a frown. By primitives wielding chemical propellant weapons? The initial phase of Operation Planetary Subjugation had begun precisely according to standard protocol. Their preliminary scans had identified Earth as a Type 2 civilization at best, marginally unified, technologically rudimentary, and ideally suited for swift conquest. The deployment of a single elite Vanguard division to establish a beachhead in a remote, sparsely populated region seemed more than adequate based on all Imperial metrics. The selected landing zone, a mountainous woodland in what the natives called North America, should have offered minimal resistance. Their tactical algorithms predicted no more than a dozen casualties at most, primarily from environmental factors rather than native opposition. Instead, the battlefield feeds had quickly devolved into chaos. The elite Glorpian warriors, each with cybernetic enhancements and weaponry capable of reducing buildings to ash, had been systematically decimated by the natives' inexplicable tactics. "Show me the battle recordings again," Forlag demanded, her tone sharp with barely concealed rage. The holographic display shifted, revealing the forest terrain where their troops had deployed. The initial landing had proceeded smoothly, dropships disgorging combat units in perfect formation. Then the assault had begun. What followed was a tactical nightmare. The indigenous defenders seemed to materialize from the terrain itself, using the forest and elevation with a familiarity that negated much of the Glorpians' technological advantage. Primitive projectile weapons found gaps in advanced armor. Improvisés d'explosifs devices disrupted formation intégrité. Communications were intercepted and compromised with alarming speed. Most disturbing was the natives' battle behavior. They continued fighting despite injuries that should have incapacitated them, demonstrated no fear response to superior firepower, and adapted to Glorpian tactics within minutes rather than hours or days. "Enough!" Forlag slammed her command appendage against the tactical display. "Commander Kalen, I want answers. How did our elite division suffer such losses against primitives armed with rudimentary ballistic weapons? Your preliminary analysis is due in 6 cycles." "Yes, Admiral," Kalen replied, already compiling the data streams for deeper examination. Something about this encounter defied all established conquest protocols, and he was determined to understand what. Commander Kalen's analysis chamber hummed with activity as his intelligence team processed the battle recordings. Holographic displays surrounded them, each showing different aspects of the failed engagement. "Observe their appearance," Kalen instructed his team, highlighting several of the human combatants. Physical diversity suggesting no genetic optimization program. Primitive armor systems with minimal integration. No visible neural interfaces or cybernetic enhancements. Lieutenant Mevix, his chief intelligence analyst, manipulated the display to focus on a particular human fighter. Yet this one eliminated 3 of our elite warriors before being neutralized. Their tactics are perplexing, added tactical analyst Dren. They use their terrain knowledge effectively, but their formations appear loosely structured rather than following rigid combat protocols. Kalen nodded, his own confusion growing. And their weaponry, chemically propelled metal projectiles, yet somehow they identified the vulnerable junction points in our exo-armor with remarkable precision. For hours, they analyzed footage, comparing it against the vast database of previous conquests. Nothing matched the pattern they were observing. The humans fought like no other species they had encountered, not with overwhelming technology or numbers, but with a disturbing adaptability and resilience. Commander, called communications specialist Thrix from across the chamber. I believe we've decrypted some of their battlefield communications. Kalen moved swiftly to the communication station. Let me hear it. The audio crackled through the ship's translation matrix, converting the human language into understandable form. Delta Scout, this is Command. What's your status? Command, we've engaged unknown hostiles. Definitely not conventional forces. Repeat, not conventional. These aren't Russians or Chinese. Not human. Copy that. Reinforcements are inbound. Hold position. Roger that. Tell them to bring the heavy stuff. These bastards have some kind of energy weapons and advanced armor. We're holding them with AP rounds, but barely. Understood. How's the weekend training exercise going otherwise? There was laughter through the static. Oh, just peachy, sir. Beats PowerPoint training back at base. Kalen replayed the transmission twice, focusing on specific phrases. Weekend training exercise, he repeated slowly. Analyze all intercepted communications for similar references. Within moments, the intelligence system compiled its findings. The display filled with similar communications, all containing variations of the same disturbing theme. Just our luck to encounter aliens during a routine drill. Tell my wife I'll be late for dinner. Weekend warrior duty just got interesting. Sergeant, this sure beats our normal reserve training. Kalen felt a cold sensation wash over him as the pattern became clear. Cross-reference with their military structure references, he ordered, his voice tightening. The results appeared almost instantly on the main display. Delta Scout Unit, National Guard Reserve Training Division. By the cosmic progenitors, whispered Mevix, using a rare religious invocation. They're not their primary military force. Kalen stared at the designation, understanding crashing down on him like a collapsing star. These weren't their warriors. These were part-time soldiers, training units. The room fell into stunned silence as the implication settled over the intelligence team. Their elite Vanguard division, cybernetically enhanced, tactically superior, equipped with weapons that could level cities, had been decimated by humans who were apparently engaged in periodic military practice during their designated leisure time. Admiral Forlag's response to Kalen's report was predictable. Her exoskeleton flared with bioluminescent patterns indicating extreme agitation as she paced the command deck. Impossible, she insisted for the 3rd time, her secondary appendages twitching violently. Our forces are the pinnacle of galactic military evolution. They cannot have been defeated by weekend practitioners. Strategic Officer ZYTH, however, had remained unnervingly still throughout Kalen's presentation. His sensory stalks extended fully, a sign of deep concentration. The data appears conclusive, Admiral, ZYTH finally said. Our Vanguard encountered what the humans designate as National Guard or Reserve units. Military forces composed of citizens who maintain civilian occupations while training periodically for combat readiness. I refuse to accept that explanation, Forlag snapped. Commander Kalen, reanalyze all data. There must be another explanation. Kalen stood his ground. Admiral, I've verified these findings through multiple analytical approaches. The communications are authentic. Our forces encountered a unit designated Delta Scout, engaged in what they termed a weekend training exercise. Further intercepted communications confirm this was not their professional standing military. The command deck fell silent, the implications hanging heavy in the recycled atmosphere. The Empire's elite warriors had been defeated not by Earth's primary military force, but by what appear to be part-time soldiers engaged in routine practice. ZYTH's voice cut through the silence. If this represents their reserve forces' capabilities, we must reconsider our entire strategic approach to this planet. Forlag turned sharply. Are you suggesting retreat, strategic officer? I am suggesting caution, Admiral, ZYEH replied evenly. If their part-time military units could inflict such casualties on our elite forces, a full engagement with their professional military might prove problematic. The Admiral's posture stiffened, her pride visibly wounded. But before she could respond, Kalen intervened. Admiral, with respect, I believe we need more information. I propose a targeted acquisition mission to capture several of these humans for direct interrogation. This would provide clearer insight into their military structure and capabilities. Forlag considered this for a moment. Your proposal has merit, Commander. Prepare a stealth extraction team. I want specimens representing different functional roles within their military hierarchy. ZYEH's sensory appendages contracted in concern. Admiral, such action risks escalation before we fully understand what we're facing. Your concern is noted, Strategic Officer, Forlag replied coldly. But I will not report to Imperial Command that we were repelled by part-time warriors without comprehensive evidence. Commander Kalen, you have 12 cycles to execute your mission. Kalen nodded, already calculating the parameters for a successful extraction operation. Yet as he left the command deck, he couldn't shake the growing sense that they had fundamentally misjudged this species from the beginning. The extraction team descended under cover of darkness, their adaptive camouflage rendering them nearly invisible against the night sky. Commander Kalen had selected his most skilled operatives for this mission, veterans of countless infiltrations across multiple planetary systems. Their target was a small outpost several kilometers from the initial engagement zone, identified as a temporary base for the Human Reserve Unit. Intelligence suggested it would be lightly defended, with most survivors of the initial conflict having been evacuated to more secure facilities. Kalen monitored the operation from his tactical chamber aboard the command ship, a growing unease settling in his thoracic cavity. Despite their advanced, non-lethal technologies specifically designed for specimen collection, he had doubled the standard team size for this mission. Approach vector clear, reported the team leader through the secure channel. Minimal electronic countermeasures detected. Proceeding to Phase 2. The extraction team moved with practiced precision, surrounding the small cluster of temporary structures. Their biosensors detected 7 human life signs, a manageable number for clean extraction. Deploy neural suppressors on my mark, the team leader ordered. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The sophisticated devices activated simultaneously, emitting precisely calibrated pulses designed to temporarily disrupt neural activity in mammalian nervous systems. It was technology that had successfully incapacitated 30 different species across the galaxy. But something unexpected happened. Sir, 3 targets still mobile. The team leader's voice carried an unfamiliar note of alarm. Neural suppressors at maximum output. Kalen leaned forward, intensifying the feed. How could any of them remain conscious under full suppressor output? Engage secondary containment protocols, he ordered sharply. Priority is clean extraction without fatalities. The team closed in with specialized containment fields. Despite the partial failure of the neural suppressors, they managed to secure all 7 humans, though not without difficulty. 2 extraction specialists suffered injuries from what appeared to be improvised weapons, a disturbing display of resourcefulness from partially incapacitated subjects. 6 hours later, 3 selected specimens were secured in the examination chamber aboard the command ship. Kalen had chosen them based on apparent rank insignia and behavior patterns during the capture, One appeared to be a mid-level authority figure, a sergeant. Another demonstrated technical aptitude during resistance, and a third had shown tactical awareness that suggested combat experience. Kalen observed them through the one-way barrier. Unlike most captured species, who typically displayed fear or aggression, these humans exhibited a strange calm punctuated by occasional communication among themselves, often accompanied by what the translation matrix identified as humor, an unusual response to captivity. Begin the interrogation, Kalen instructed the xenobiological team. Full biometric monitoring throughout. The chamber's atmospheric composition had been adjusted to optimal human parameters, and the gravitational field calibrated to Earth standard. The barrier between observation and holding areas dissolved, revealing Kalen and two specialist interrogators to the humans. The middle-aged human with sergeant insignia straightened slightly, but showed no fear response. "Well, this should be interesting," he said, his voice translated instantly by the ship's systems. "I am Commander Kalen of the Glorpian Empire," Kalen began formally. "You have been temporarily acquired for information exchange purposes." The younger human, the technical specialist, actually laughed. "Temporarily? Acquired? That's a nice way of saying abducted by aliens. Wait until I tell my IT department about this on Monday." The third human, older and more weathered, simply studied their captors with analytical intensity. "You're the same ones from a forest engagement," he stated rather than asked. Kalen noted their responses with increasing interest. "Your observations are correct. We encountered your military unit during what appeared to be a training exercise. Your resistance was unexpected." The sergeant crossed his arms. "Unexpected? You crashed our weekend drill with energy weapons and flying ships. What did you think would happen?" "Weekend drill," Kalen repeated, focusing on the phrase. "Our intelligence indicates you are part of something called National Guard or Reserves. Please elaborate on this military structure." The three humans exchanged glances, and Kalen detected subtle changes in their biometric readings. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion at the question. "We're citizen soldiers," the sergeant explained, his tone suggesting this should be obvious. "We have regular civilian jobs, but we train 1 weekend a month and 2 weeks a year to be ready if needed. I'm a high school history teacher during the week. I work in IT security," added the younger human. "Fix computers, stop hackers, that kind of thing." "Hardware store manager," said the third simply. 20 years in regular army before that, though." Kalen struggled to process this information. "You maintain civilian occupations, yet possess military training sufficient to effectively combat our elite forces." The former army soldier shrugged. "Your elite forces made some rookie mistakes. Bunched up too much. Didn't secure their flanks. Kept using the same approach vectors after we figured out their patterns." "But you are not full-time warriors," Kalen pressed, trying to understand. "Most of us have seen actual combat tours in Afghanistan, Iraq, or other hotspots," the sergeant explained. "The Guard and Reserves get deployed alongside regular forces these days. We're not weekend warriors in the way you seem to think." The xenobiological team was conducting scans throughout the conversation. One approached Kalen with preliminary results. "Commander, the scans confirm no significant cybernetic enhancements, genetic modifications, or neural augmentations," the specialist reported quietly. "They appear to be baseline humans with standard biological parameters." Kalen felt his worldview shifting uncomfortably. "Your regular military forces, they are more formidable than your reserve units?" The three humans laughed in unison, a response Kalen found deeply unsettling. "Our active duty forces have better equipment, more frequent training, and specialized units that would make our little skirmish look like a picnic," the sergeant said. "And that's just conventional forces," added the IT specialist. "Wait until you meet our special operations teams." The former soldier fixed Kalen with a steady gaze. "Humanity has been fighting itself for thousands of years. We got very good at it. All those wars gave us plenty of practice for when someone like you shows up." A cold realization settled over Kalen. Their entire threat assessment model for this species was catastrophically wrong. These humans didn't fit any established pattern in the Imperial database. Their combination of technological limitations and tactical adaptability, civilian lifestyle and combat effectiveness, represented something the Empire had never encountered. One last question, Kalen said, struggling to maintain his composure. If your part-time military forces could inflict such damage on our elite units, what would your full military response look like? The three humans exchanged glances again, and Kalen detected what his systems identified as grim amusement in their expressions. Ever since we started making science fiction movies, we've been thinking about how to fight aliens, the sergeant said, his tone shifting to something more serious. It's practically a cultural obsession, and now you've confirmed we're not alone in the universe by attacking us. So congratulations, you've just unified Earth like nothing in history ever has. While Commander Kalen conducted his interrogation, the situation beyond the Glorpian command ship was evolving with alarming speed. Strategic Officer ZYTH monitored the incoming data streams with growing concern. Admiral, he reported, his voice tense. Our observation systems are detecting massive military mobilizations across the planet's surface. Admiral Forlag approached the strategic display, her exoskeleton radiating skepticism. Show me. The holographic projection expanded to reveal a global view of Earth. Highlighted points indicated military installations with increased activity, transportation networks surging with movement, and communication patterns suggesting a coordinated response. What had begun as a localized reaction to their incursion was rapidly developing into a planet-wide mobilization. Their response time is unprecedented for a species at their technological level, ZYTH observed. Their global communication networks are facilitating coordination that should be beyond their capabilities. Are they deploying weapons systems capable of threatening our fleet? Forlag demanded. Not directly, ZYTH replied, but our cybersecurity systems are detecting sophisticated intrusion attempts against our communication arrays. They're probing our defenses with surprising effectiveness. Primitive computers against our quantum encryption? Forlag scoffed. Impossible. With respect, Admiral, they're employing distributed attack methods across thousands of nodes. Their approach is innovative. ZYTH's sensory stocks contracted in concern. More troubling is the information dissemination pattern. The display shifted to show a representation of human digital networks, pulsing with activity. Their information-sharing platforms, what the humans called social media, were spreading awareness of the Glorpian presence globally, bypassing official channels and creating a unified planetary response outside governmental control. Their civilian population is self-organizing, ZYEH explained, sharing tactical information, coordinating observations, even developing countermeasures through collaborative networks. It's unlike anything we've seen in previous conquests. Before Forlag could respond, Commander Kalen entered the command center. His posture conveyed urgent concern. Admiral, strategic officer, he acknowledged. The interrogation has yielded critical information that significantly alters our threat assessment. He quickly summarized his findings. The nature of Earth's reserve forces, the implications of their military structure, and most disturbingly, the psychological and cultural factors that made humans uniquely dangerous opponents. These weekend warriors explicitly warned that their professional military forces are substantially more formidable, Kalen concluded. And their cultural fixation on extraterrestrial conflict scenarios means they've been psychologically preparing for this encounter for generations. ZYTH immediately connected this information to his own observations. This explains the unprecedented speed and coordination of their response. Their cultural mythology has created a prepared mindset for exactly this scenario. Admiral Forlag's bioluminescent patterns flickered with agitation. You expect me to report to the Supreme Overseer that we're retreating because of primitive mythology and part-time soldiers? Admiral, Kalen said carefully, I've run preliminary simulations incorporating this new data. Standard conquest protocols against this species predict casualty rates exceeding 70% for our forces, with success probability below acceptable thresholds. I concur, ZYTH added, displaying his own analysis. Observe the planetary immobilization patterns. Their response indicates a species with extraordinary adaptive capabilities and unexpected psychological resilience. The standard subjugation timeline would be extended by at least 300%, with resource expenditure far exceeding projected gains. Forlag stared at the data, her pride warring with her tactical responsibility. The Supreme Overseer expects results, not excuses for failure. The Supreme Overseer expects victory, ZYEH countered carefully. If that cannot be achieved within acceptable parameters, strategic repositioning is the logical course. Retreat, you mean? Forlag said bitterly. Tactical withdrawal to reassess, Kalen suggested instead. We could return the acquired specimens as a de-escalation gesture. It might provide an opening for future approaches that don't involve direct conflict. For several long moments, Forlag stood in silence, her compound eyes fixed on the holographic representation of Earth, a planet that should have been an easy conquest but had instead delivered the Empire's most humiliating defeat in centuries. Prepare a withdrawal plan, she finally ordered, her voice tight with suppressed rage. And release the humans with appropriate memory suppression protocols. I want the fleet ready for translocation in 20 cycles. As Kalen moved to implement these orders, he couldn't help but wonder if standard memory suppression would even work on these strangely resilient beings. The vast command ship of the Glorpian Empire moved silently away from Earth orbit, accompanied by the remainder of the invasion fleet. The bridge was unnaturally quiet, the usual bustle of activity subdued by the weight of their unprecedented failure. Admiral Forlag stood rigidly before the main viewport, her exoskeleton darkened to match her mood. The official report had been transmitted to Imperial Command, carefully worded to emphasize the unique biological and psychological factors that necessitated strategic reassessment of the conquest approach. Everyone aboard knew the truth. They had been defeated not by superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but by part-time soldiers engaged in weekend training. Commander Kalen, Forlag said without turning, the Supreme Overseer has acknowledged our report. You are to head a new specialized division effective immediately. Kalen approached cautiously. Admiral, the Human Threat Assessment Task Force, she continued, her tone flat. You will have whatever resources you require to conduct a comprehensive analysis of this species. The Supreme Overseer considers them a priority research subject. Kalen understood the subtext clearly. Forlag had saved her position by transferring the responsibility and opportunity to him. Success would redeem them both. Failure would ensure his career's end. I accept the assignment, Admiral, he replied formally. Nearby, Strategic Officer ZYDH observed the exchange with his characteristic reserve. Though vindicated by events, he took no satisfaction in it. His concern had only deepened with each new piece of information about the humans. As the fleet entered translocation coordinates for the return journey, Kalen retreated to his new command center. The space had already been reconfigured with dedicated analysis systems and direct access to the Empire's xenobiological databases. His task was monumental, to understand a species that defied all established patterns. He began by reviewing the interrogation recordings, focusing on the casual but chilling warnings the humans had delivered. The history teacher's description of Earth's endless wars. The technology specialist's reference to their cultural obsession with extraterrestrial conflict. The former soldier's matter-of-fact assessment of their tactical adaptability. One exchange particularly haunted him. Your people seem remarkably comfortable with the idea of us, Kalen had observed during the interrogation. The sergeant had smiled in a way that the emotional analysis system had flagged as predatory. We've been making movies about killing aliens for over a century, he had replied. Half our video games are about fighting off invasions. It's like we've been psychologically preparing for you without even knowing you existed. This cultural fixation represented a variable the Empire had never encountered, a species that had imagined its own conquest so thoroughly that when the actual event occurred, they slipped into prepared psychological patterns rather than experiencing the expected terror and disorganization. For days that stretched into weeks, Kalen immersed himself in human culture, history, and military tradition. The picture that emerged was deeply disturbing. Humans had indeed been at war with themselves throughout their recorded history, developing a vast repertoire of combat tactics and psychological resilience. Their technological progress had been driven largely by military necessity, creating a strange mixture of primitive and sophisticated capabilities. Most concerning was their distributed power structure. Unlike most species the Empire had subjugated, humans lacked a central authority whose elimination would collapse resistance. Instead, they operated in layered, redundant systems that could continue functioning even when decapitated. The simulation models Kalen developed painted an increasingly grim picture. Standard conquest protocols showed failure rates approaching 95% when adjusted for the new data. Alternative approaches, from technological subversion to biological warfare, all encountered the same fundamental problem: human adaptability. 3 months after their retreat from Earth, Kalen presented his preliminary findings to the Supreme Overseers Council. The vast chamber, designed to intimidate with its towering architecture and imposing technological displays, fell into stunned silence as his analysis concluded. In summary, Kalen stated, the human species represents a potentially existential threat to imperial expansion in their sector. Despite their technological limitations, their psychological makeup, distributed power structures, and extraordinary adaptability make them unsuitable for standard conquest protocols. The Supreme Overseer, a being of ancient lineage whose exoskeleton bore the accumulated ornamentations of countless successful conquests, leaned forward. You suggest we abandon an entire sector because of one troublesome species, Commander? I suggest we recognize that our encounter with their scout unit was not an aberration, but a warning, Kalen replied carefully. The humans have a saying that proved disturbingly accurate in our simulations. You only get one chance to make a first impression. We have squandered that chance. He gestured to the holographic display, showing Earth rotating slowly in the void. Our current models indicate that any renewed attempt at conquest would require resources exceeding the projected value of the entire sector by 300%. More concerning is the possibility that conflict would accelerate their technological development, potentially creating a rival power within a single generation. What then is your recommendation, Commander? The Overseer asked, compound eyes gleaming with dangerous intensity. Kalen paused, knowing his next words might determine not only his future, but potentially the Empire's approach to a new class of threats. I recommend a diplomatic approach unprecedented in Imperial history, he said finally. Not conquest, but contact. Not subjugation, but study. The humans represent something we have not encountered before. A species whose psychological and social evolution has outpaced their technological development in ways that make them uniquely dangerous as opponents, but potentially valuable as allies. The chamber erupted in conflicting vocalizations, some expressing outrage at the suggestion, others curious about this radical departure from imperial doctrine. Through the commotion, Kalen's gaze remained fixed on the slowly rotating image of Earth. In his mind, he heard again the casual warning of the captured sergeant. We've been thinking about how to fight aliens since before we had airplanes. It's practically a cultural obsession. A primitive species with a warrior's psychology, distributed power, and extraordinary adaptability. And they had only encountered their weekend warriors. The question of the title hung heavily in the recycled air. What horror awaited if they were to face the humans' actual army? In that moment, looking at the seemingly innocuous blue planet, Commander Kalen felt something he had never experienced in his distinguished military career: fear.